Welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. The NBA trade deadline is just a few days away. Make sure you join us on February 9th. We'll be live all day long for you guys, breaking down every single transaction as it happens. We really appreciate those of you who've joined us over the past couple of weeks through all of our trade deadline coverage. We'll be live for you guys every single night up until the deadline around 9 p.m. So make sure you join us. Hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN and on our Facebook page, Upside Sports Network. But welcome in. A lot of news from around the NBA, a lot of news around Kyrie Irving, the Utah Jazz, the LA Lakers, the Dallas Mavericks, OG Anunoby, the Toronto Raptors. A lot of news out there. Let's get into it. Now, first and foremost anyway, let's talk a little bit about Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving demanded yet another trade request. This is, I believe, his fourth trade request that he's made since he's entered the NBA. The first one, of course, coming from the Cleveland Cavaliers. They traded him to Boston. He wanted out of Boston. He ends up in Brooklyn anyway. He makes a trade request at the beginning of this, or just before this season anyway, and rescinds that trade request as it became apparent that he wasn't going to go anywhere. Now this will make another trade request right now. And basically seems like this is his leverage to try to convince the Brooklyn Nets to move him. He's trying to get to a team that he prefers, at least right now. The belief around the NBA was that he was going to have to either accept a sign-in trade with the Brooklyn Nets after the season to be able to go to one of his preferred destinations, or B, take a destination that he doesn't necessarily want to go to and just take their money. Now, the destinations that he had interested in the past anyway was the Miami Heat, the LA Lakers, and the Dallas Mavericks. There are still those same three destinations in there, along with a fourth team. We'll dig into that in just a moment. But there is a lot of headlines around Kyrie Irving. Pretty much all the same talk that we talked about this offseason about Kyrie Irving and where he could possibly go pretty much still applies. The same still goes for the Dallas Mavericks. They're looking for a second superstar next to Luka. They could use another ball handler. So coming into Dallas would fit very well. The LA Lakers are looking for another star to fit in their lineup. They don't necessarily have all the assets that other teams do. This might be their one chance to acquire a player of his caliber. They might be the one team that's actually able to control Kyrie Irving a little bit better as far as being able to handle his off the field or off the court antics, those kinds of things. Big brother and LeBron James being there. LeBron, of course, a lot longer in the tooth than he was in his days in Cleveland. Probably a little bit more understanding of where Kyrie Irving's coming from as a player. Understands how to work with him. They've had time apart. Distance makes the heart grow fonder, or whatever they try to tell us, etc. But maybe something like that could be in the works for him. As far as the Miami Heat, of course they have Kyle Lowry, but you can't tell me that Kyle Lowry is a better player than Kyrie Irving. I'm sure they'd love to make that switch in a heartbeat. But the big thing here is what exactly would appease the Brooklyn Nets as far as a trade. Now, I was just reading an article a few moments ago about how the LA Lakers and the Utah Jazz have had exploratory talks about possibly sending Russell Westbrook to the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz have a ton of pieces to trade here at the deadline. The only two players on the roster they are not moving would be Lauri Markkanen and Kessler, the one first-round pick that they did get from the Minnesota Timberwolves in the trade for Rudy Gobert. Outside of that, everybody else on the roster seems to be readily available for trade. So as far as a fit there, the Brooklyn Nets could basically pick and choose what pieces they would like to have. For instance, a Mike Conley going back to Brooklyn, in addition to maybe a rotation piece, maybe even a pick. That would really accelerate their growth a little bit. While they wouldn't necessarily have the same impact of a Kyrie Irving on their roster, they could certainly create more depth around the deadline. They are said to be looking for a defensive-minded big man to back up Nick Claxton. They could use some help at the wing because they do have injury issues there. T.J. Warren's coming back from a major injury. Remember, he was great in the bubble, but of course he's missed some time. Then, of course, you have Kevin Durant, who's missed some time already this year. Bringing in somebody who fits those or fills in at the wing spot there would be very good for them. They have a history of trading between the Brooklyn Nets and the Utah Jazz already. Just within the past 6 months or so, they made the trade to send Royce O'Neal to the Brooklyn Nets for a first-round pick. Maybe Brooklyn says, hey, we want the first-round pick we gave you back. There's all kinds of mechanisms that could work to the Lakers' advantage if they're able to rope in the Utah Jazz as kind of a complementary third team in this type of a trade just to get the Brooklyn Nets what they need. The LA Lakers basically have expiring contracts in Russell Westbrook and Patrick Beverley to deal. They don't really have young assets that they're willing to move. They do have a couple of first-round picks further in the distance as far as a 2027 first-rounder and a 2029 first-rounder. The ask before the season was said to be around a first-round pick plus from the LA Lakers, maybe even both of those first-round picks. But if they're not willing to give up both of those pieces, maybe they're able to rope in the Utah Jazz and work out some type of other deal to make this work. But the LA Lakers are showing renewed optimism about their ability to contend this year after the Rui Hachimura deal. It's really kind of spurred them along because they really had no depth at wing. Now they brought in one wing. They're willing to bring in others. Kyrie Irving, though, would be the piece that they would really need to kind of get over the top, in my opinion, to push themselves possibly past the play-in tournament and maybe into the top 6 out in the Western Conference. When you have a team with LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and Anthony Davis, when healthy, when on the court together, that's a very formidable team. And then you have some depth behind them with Rui Hachimura, Thomas Bryant, players like that. They still need to build out that bench. They could, of course, go to Carmelo Anthony to get them some shot making ability here after the deadline. That's always a possibility. He is part of the Banana Boat crew anyway, with LeBron James, Chris Paul, and Dwayne Wade. So there is some familiarity there. So if they need some scoring punch from a big man, they could always go that free agency route after the deadline. But bringing in Kyrie Irving would be a fantastic fit for the LA Lakers. But just wanted to say thank you guys for joining us over the past couple of days. We've gained quite a few subscribers. We had a lot of interest in our Tom Brady video. I think we had the most likes on one of our shorts that we've ever had. So thank you guys for joining us. Really appreciate all the support. If you haven't already liked the video, please do so. It really does help us out. Got a whole bunch of feedback on a lot of the videos that I put out over the last 24 hours. We are back in business. Power is restored down here in Texas. Only a little bit of damage to the truck, house, and to the back fence anyway. But everybody was okay. The storms and everything, everybody survived just fine. And we're ready to get rocking and rolling. The NBA trade deadline, as I mentioned, will be live for you guys all day long on February 9th, bringing you every single transaction as it happens. Who wins and loses the trade? What does this affect their team as far as their chance to make a postseason run? Does this drop them all the way into the lottery? Will their future be impacted even more so? Let us know in the comments section what you guys are looking for at the NBA trade deadline. Are you looking at the wing market with possibly OG Anunoby, Jeremy Grant, Dorian Finney-Smith, Tim Hardaway Jr., Caris LeVert, Jay Crowder, players of that ilk? Are you looking at the guard market with players like John Wall, Mike Conley, D'Angelo Russell, Fred VanVleet? Are you looking at the big mans, Jakob Poeltl, Jared Vanderbilt, among several others, including Naz Reid from the Minnesota Timberwolves, Mo Bamba from the Orlando Magic? There's a lot of trade possibilities out there. We're going to put out a whole bunch of videos for you guys tomorrow. I do work my 9 to 5 tomorrow, so after we get back from work tomorrow, we'll be making a whole bunch of videos for you guys to be posted over the weekend. So usually we don't post over the weekend. With the deadline imminent, we're going to be making a ton of videos, a lot of live content for you guys as well. So make sure you hit that subscribe button Follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN to stay up to date on all of the latest information from the NBA trade deadline. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. Let's kind of run through a lot of the headlines that we have right now. Kyrie Irving is looking for a long-term contract. That seems to be the sticking point with him and the Brooklyn Nets. Seems like he doesn't feel valued by that organization. Brooklyn kind of came into the season kind of on a wait-and-see approach. They didn't want the headache, the off-the-field issues, off-the-court issues, if you will, with Kyrie Irving anymore. And so it seemed to everybody on the outside looking in at the beginning of this season that they were just going to take it all the way into free agency and work out a sign and trade with one of his preferred destinations. Well, Kyrie Irving's answer to that is saying, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and get this thing done now. Why wait until then? We want to go ahead and lock up our long-term money right now. You never know what type of injury may befall you. He's looking at a roster right now that has players who've secured that long-term money first, like a Joe Harris, like a Kevin Durant, and had big time injuries. Then he looks on that same roster and says, hey, I've got a couple of other players on this roster who didn't necessarily secure the bag before they were injured. Looking at TJ Warren, etc. He's got some examples there of what to do as far as a player approaching free agency and what not to do. He wants to lock up a long-term deal. Now, the thing with the Kyrie Irving trade, he has a trade kicker worth 15% that would have to be paid by the Brooklyn Nets in order to facilitate a trade. Now, unless they rework the contract and say no to the trade kicker, something like that, then that could be a wrench thrown in things for the Kyrie Irving sweepstakes. Now, as far as the acquiring team, what could they end up doing? It could be a trade and extend type of situation. A lot of teams out there, though, are a little reticent to be able to give him a max extension. They would be able to give him a 2-year max after this. That's actually, I think, a pretty fair deal considering what Kyrie Irving does bring to the table. He is 30 years old. He's still got some mileage on him, but he's still got a lot of prime years ahead of him, probably about 2 or 3 of really productive years, and you're only extending his contract 2 years after this. If I'm those teams and I'm willing to make the decision to acquire Kyrie Irving, if I'm the LA Lakers, who exactly am I going to get better than Kyrie Irving right now? I would immediately go ahead and give him that max extension. He would be worth it. Even if he gives you the headache issues, you have to take a stock of where you are in the standings right now. Your only real option to acquire a superstar is this type of a move, and so you have to figure out a way to make it work. For the Dallas Mavericks, they could go a number of different directions as far as the trade deadline. They could sell off a bunch of pieces, acquire a bunch of picks, go into free agency, and hope that they can lure a guy like D'Angelo Russell, Fred VanVleet to come in and then maybe make a big trade with some of the first-round picks that they would acquire after the trade deadline this year. Say they go into free agency with a little bit of cap space and they've got rid of all their long-term deals. They're still not going to be able to offer a max in free agency. They're going to have to figure out another way to do it. I believe they've got too many big long-term contracts on their books now. They should have done this a lot earlier with Luka Doncic, but unfortunately, they pushed their chips to the center with Kristaps Porzingis. That didn't work out, and I think they pulled the trigger a little bit too late on the trade to get him out of town. However, the Dinwiddie part of the trade looks really good for them, and the Bertans, of course, still looks terrible, but it's a more tradable contract than Kristaps Porzingis is, and so we'll see if they can work something out. But if you're a team looking at Kyrie Irving, I think if you're willing to give up the first round pick or whatever the capital is needed to be able to facilitate a trade with the Brooklyn Nets, you better be willing to give him a 2-year max to be able to lock him in for at least a couple more years. Now, if you're talking about a 4-year extension, then I could understand the pause. But only 2 years, I understand the risk, but you got to figure a way to make it work for at least 2 years. And if it doesn't work, so be it. You enter free agency after that 2 years is over, or you find a way to get out of the contract, or whatever the case may be. He does not want any stipulations in the contract as far as off-the-court behavior, those kinds of things, and that seems to be the sticking point with extension talks with the Brooklyn Nets, that they may have been willing to give him the long-term deal that he wanted financially, but they had big-time stipulations on it as far as play on the court, injury issues. They had off the court concerns as far as his Twitter usage. I'm sure they had some feedback in there. He had all kinds of issues. He was suspended for a period of time earlier this season because of his handling of some issues that he had off the court. And I wonder how exactly the Brooklyn Nets really offer, or how much they were really willing to offer him outside of those stipulations. Because if they don't have the stipulations, I don't think the Brooklyn Nets would have been willing to give him a max. And I think that's where Kyrie Irving, before he announced before the trade request became public, he posted a cryptic tweet basically saying, "Go where you're valued, know your worth," those kinds of things. You can check out the tweet for yourself on his Twitter feed. But that was kind of the gist of it, that he didn't feel like the Brooklyn Nets appreciated the effort that he was giving to that team, and they may not have been, at least in his eyes. And Not a good way for this season to kind of unfold for them, but maybe Brooklyn finally turns the page from the Kyrie Irving issue and really kind of pushes forward if they make the right move. Say they bring in a Mike Conley to take over the point guard role for Kyrie Irving and bring in a six-man type like a Colin Sexton or somebody like that to fill that role, maybe even a pick. That would be something that I would look at as the Brooklyn Nets front office and say, hey, that's something I can work with, and maybe overall I have a better team. I still don't agree with the Ben Simmons trade for James Harden. I think that is a sunk cost at this point. He doesn't really give you anything offensively. Defensively, he's very versatile, very long defender. He's very good on that end, but he's giving you nothing on the offensive end of the floor. And I think that's ultimately going to be the undoing for the Brooklyn Nets long term. But at least for the next couple of years, they have a real chance to put together a nice core. If they can make the right move here with Kyrie Irving, maybe they can stay in contention in the East for the rest of this season, and at least for the next 2 years or so with Kevin Durant. But let us know in the comment section where you think Kyrie Irving is going to go. Do you think he goes to Dallas for, say, a package of Bertans, maybe Tim Hardaway Jr. and a pick? Or do you think he goes to the LA Lakers in a three-team deal that sends Russell Westbrook to Utah, maybe Conley and Sexton to the Brooklyn Nets? Or do you think he goes straight up with the LA Lakers and just sends Russell Westbrook back to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for 2 first-round picks? He would immediately fill in as the point guard there for Kyrie Irving. The 2 first-round picks would be invaluable for trade as they try to build up their roster a little bit. Maybe this facilitates other moves for the Brooklyn Nets, allows them to get the wing that they would like, allows them to get the backup big man that they would like to go after. But the Brooklyn Nets have a lot of options now that he's made his trade request public. But outside of Kyrie Irving, there's still some more issues around the league that have been resolved, at least for now. Dillon Brooks was suspended for his role in the altercation with Donovan Mitchell. Mitchell was only fined. Brooks was suspended for 1 game. Overall, it seems like much ado about nothing is what it ultimately came to. We'll see if anything else comes down the pike after this, but it's going to be a little bit of a heated rivalry next time they end up facing each other. Jusuf Nurkic, we put out a video about him today. He is going to be out until after the All-Star break. I wonder if this throws a wrench into the trade deadline plans for the Portland Trailblazers. Trailblazers could still move him. He has 4 years left on his deal, and he's supposedly going to be healthy long before the end of the season. So I don't think it'd be too much of an impediment, but you got to worry about the medicals now if you're a team willing to bring on that level of contract for that type of a player. Big man and injuries usually don't work out the older they get, and you always got to look at those medicals very carefully, especially on older big men. But they're said to be interested in bringing in Jared Vanderbilt from the Utah Jazz, looking to get more athletic, more switchable on defense. Nurkic can only really guard 2 positions, power forward and center. Outside of that, he's a little bit of a liability on defense. Jared Vanderbilt can guard anything from a 2, 3, 4, or even a 5 in the lineup. Has really blossomed his offensive game as well with the Utah Jazz, and he'd be a nice piece to bring into the Portland Trailblazers. The question is, what would the acquisition cost be? Maybe a pick, maybe Josh Hart, maybe a combination of the two. Maybe there's a 3-team deal where they send Josh Hart to the Orlando Magic for some other assets that could go to Utah. There's all kinds of machinations that could work out, but you've noticed over the last 10 minutes or so, we've talked a lot about the Utah Jazz, and that's because they've done a lot of different trades so far in the last, we'll call it 365 days. They jettisoned their 2 stars off their roster, Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, to the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Cleveland Cavaliers, respectively. They sent out Royce O'Neal to the Brooklyn Nets. They sent out Bojan Bogdanovic to the Detroit Pistons. All of those deals got them picks, and they could still add even more. They could trade away Malik Beasley. They could trade away Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Vanderbilt has some value. Kelly Olynyk has some value. Colin Sexton, even with his injury issue last year, he has some value. Mike Conley is well desired around the NBA right now. I know the Washington Wizards are interested. The LA Clippers, the LA Lakers are all interested in bringing in Mike Conley, and we'll see where he ends up going. But the Jazz are going to be one of the focal points of this year's trade deadline, so make sure you keep your feeds open for anything Utah Jazz related, because it might include your favorite team as well. Utah is going to be a popular team to be included in 3-team deals because they have a lot of different variable assets. They have picks that they could include in a trade. They got young players that they could include in a trade. They got contracts that are movable on their roster. They got 6-man options. They got defense defense on options that they could trade here at the deadline. They have veteran guards that they could deal here at the deadline, and they have upside players like Jared Vanderbilt that they could deal as well. So keep your eyes peeled for what happens with the Utah Jazz. If you're a Dallas Mavericks fan, maybe they're involved in a 3-team deal to get you, the star of your choosing. If you're LA Lakers fan, we just talked about the machinations that could bring them Kyrie Irving. There's a lot of deals that could be made, including the Utah Jazz as a third team, to make the trade a little bit more feasible for both sides involved. But keep your eyes peeled for the Utah Jazz. We put out a video today about the Portland Trailblazers being a strong suitor for Jared Vanderbilt. That still remains the case right now. It seems like that's the one team that's really interested in bringing in Jordan Vanderbilt. I'm sure other teams would love to do it, but I'm not sure they have the ammunition to do so. Looking at the Milwaukee Bucks, they're looking at the wing market right now, most notably at Jay Crowder. There was a deal in talks anyway between the Suns and the Bucks that would have sent Grayson Allen to the Phoenix Suns in exchange for Jay Crowder. And that deal is not going to happen. The Phoenix Suns have no interest in Grayson Allen. They are looking for guards in light of injury issues that they've had at the position, and of course Chris Paul's age. The thing with the Phoenix Suns, though, is they're also looking down the road and making some big movement as far as possibly dealing guys like Chris Paul to kind of interject some new talent into that roster with the new ownership group that's coming in. They're looking to make some big moves this offseason. I don't think they'll do it yet at the trade deadline. I think they'll kind of stick with what they've got right now. But the biggest thing I think they could make during the season right now is to make a move for DeAndre Ayton, sending him out of town and bringing in a guy like OG Anunoby. That would really give them some defensive versatility as far as wings. They would be a little bit of a void anyway at the center spot, of course, because DeAndre Ayton, while he does have his limitations as far as defensively and offensively, he has his struggles anyway guarding smaller players. We saw how Luka Doncic basically played him off the floor in the playoff series. We saw during that season, or during that playoff series against the Dallas Mavericks, just the relationship between team and player really devolved for both Ayton and the Phoenix Suns. There was the entire offseason, Monty Williams and DeAndre Ayton did not speak at all. That does not speak well for your star center that you're spending $30+ million a year on. And they did match the contract offer that he signed with the Indiana Pacers. I still don't think that situation's resolved. We see him kind of having some animosity with teammates, saying there's really no heart on this team, those kinds of things. So we could see a trade that was discussed in this offseason as far as a sign and trade between Ayton going to the Toronto Raptors for OG Anunoby. The Raptors have been looking for a center for years, and this would give them their center that they've been looking for. And might be a type of trade that gets done here at the deadline as far as for the Phoenix Suns, something that would be, earth shaking for them. But they would still need to bring in a big man if they were to make that happen. Maybe a Chris Boucher coming back the other way, maybe some other talent, etc. Maybe a 3-team deal. Like I mentioned, Kelly Olynyk's been mentioned as a name that's available from the Utah Jazz. Maybe that's another deal that could be made as far as a 3-team deal to make this type of a trade happen. But that's kind of the big one, or one of the big ones that's out there. We've also mentioned in that video that we put out today about OG Anunoby that the New Orleans Pelicans were one of the other teams that were heavily interested in bringing him in. The New Orleans Pelicans have tons of first-round picks that they brought in all through their Anthony Davis trades, and they're selling off of Drew Holiday, etc. They have a lot of talent on their roster already. They traded in some of that to be able to bring in guys like C.J. McCollum, the Devontae Grahams, etc. Not that trade necessarily worked out in their favor, but they've traded a few of their assets. They've shown a willingness to spend around this roster as well. And so I wonder how they want to go about this deadline. Do they want to go ahead and push the rest of their first round picks that they've acquired into the middle for a guy like OG Anunoby, especially with the injury concerns that you have with Zion Williamson, who's out once again? He seems like a player that's going to miss a lot of time in almost every single season from here on out. So I wonder where the New Orleans Pelicans are at. Do they say, hey, this is our one chance, we've got to go ahead and try to convince Zion to stay, etc.? I wonder how things are going to work out with the New Orleans Pelicans. They're a team that you might want to keep your eyes on at the trade deadline, and then after the season, if things don't work out, what will ultimately end up happening with Zion Williamson. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. As I mentioned, we'll be putting out some videos for you guys this evening. or we'll be making some videos this evening, putting out a whole bunch of videos for you guys tomorrow and on Sunday. We will be live for you guys through the weekend as well. Normally we don't do our live during the weekend just because, well, it's the weekend. We got to make videos. We got stuff to do. We got to spend time with the family. But no, trade deadline is here. We've missed enough time already because of the storms down here in Texas. So we're going to make sure we're live for you guys on Saturday and Sunday. 9 o'clock we'll be making our lives. We were going to do our baseball one today, but again, that 9 to 5, we're back open for business. It ran a little bit long today. Get off early tomorrow, so we'll be doing our baseball live pretty much first thing when I get back tomorrow. And we'll do that one first thing and then make some videos and then do our basketball live for you guys around 9 o'clock. But just want to say thank you guys for all the support over the last, we'll call it 2 weeks anyway. We've gained quite a few subscribers. I want to say in the neighborhood of like 40 to 50 subscribers just in the past couple of weeks alone. So thank you guys for joining us. The NFL playoffs are still rolling on. The Super Bowl is right around the corner. And then the NFL offseason really gets kicking. We've already seen Sean Payton go to the Denver Broncos. That's one of the videos we'll be making for you guys tonight, breaking down the machinations of how that's going to work, the trade that's ultimately going to send him there, etc. But thank you guys for subscribing. Thank you guys for joining us. There's a whole bunch of news around Kyrie Irving. We'll be posting a whole bunch of videos about that tomorrow as well. And thank you guys for joining us. Hit that subscribe button. Join us here on YouTube. Subscribe here. Follow us on Twitter at Upside Ascent and on our Facebook page, Upside Sports Network. Thank you guys, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.